So this week I was asked to spend a half hour with the cast of Transcendence Theater Company of Sonoma. This talented group were busy rehearsing their annual Christmas show and had settled on performing the Hanukkah song Ma'oz Tzur, Rock of Ages. They asked me to come and speak with the cast about the song. I've done things with the Transcendence cast before. It's always a thrill and an honor to be in a room of such talent and energy. But my heart sank a little bit. Ma'oz Tzur? For me, Ma'oz Tzur was just an obligatory song, not especially interesting, sitting alongside other arguably tired fare, such as O Hanukkah, and I had a little dreidel. It was too familiar to be of interest and not deserving of my curiosity. But now I had the job of saying something intelligent about it. So I had to give it a second look, which really was, I'm ashamed to say, my first look. What I found was something much richer than I'd ever noticed, older and slyer than I'd given credit. As the song unfolded, it threaded itself with elements of my own story, as is always the case once I give something my full attention. So at the risk of geeking out unmercifully, I'd like to unpack Ma'oz Tzur with you, because I am now filled with excitement, and it is my life's work to make sure that you are as excited as I. First off, the basic bio. Ma'oz Tzur is a medieval piyut, like the many medieval piyutim that we do here and that we're still going to do, that we just did and that we're going to do later tonight. This one is from the Rhineland, from Old Ashkenaz, probably from the 12th century or the 13th century. Its formal tricks are probably familiar to you from other piyutim that I have brought here. It is 6 stanzas long. The first letter of each of the first 5 stanzas spell out the name Mordechai, the poet, who left his fingerprint on the poem in this way, although maybe not quite enough of a fingerprint, because there is much disagreement among scholars about which Mordechai it is. The poem has a strict, I told you could put those things down, and now I realize that you probably want to have it in front of you, now that you know that that's what I'm talking about. So feel free, it's on page, Ma'oz Tzur on page 3. So the poem has a strict and very appealing rhyme scheme that goes like this. A, B, A, B, 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 C, C, B. Isn't that something? It might go easier if we try it with the actual words. So the first stanza, Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati, that's A. L'chana el shabeach, that's B. Tikon betefilati, that's A. V'sham toda nizabeach, B again. Le'etachin matbeach, again B. Mitzar hamnabeach, and B again. Az ekmor b'shir mizmor, this is new. This is a quick internal rhyme, like in the middle of a limerick. Right? It's the same pattern as in the middle of a limerick. You get a quick internal rhyme. Chanukah hamizbeach, that's B. And then that repeats. That last little bit repeats. It didn't always repeat. It started repeating at some point in history. Some recorded point in history. It says so-and-so had the custom of repeating the last line.
History did that too.
Another Mordechai. Mordechai Jr.
C,
C, yes. Az egmor, C. B'shir mizmor, C. Chanukah hamizbeach, a final B. So each of the 6 stanzas maintains this strict rhyme scheme. Each stanza is identical in terms of its formal structure and its constraints. But the content of the stanzas varies and builds. Together, they bring us on a tour of the persecutions of Jewish history and of our survival in each case. The first stanza with the lyric Chanukat HaMizbeach, the dedication of the altar, is clearly about Hanukkah. The second verse, with its reference to Pharaoh and the kingdom of the calf, you might see that, is about our bondage in and liberation from Egypt. Yeah. The third verse is about the Babylonian conquest of 586 BCE. The fourth verse references the story of Purim, which you can tell because it talks about Haman without using the name Haman, but instead saying, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite. That's Haman. And the fifth verse returns us to the Hanukkah story, talking about the defilement of the oil for the temple and the miracle that was wrought for the lilies, for the Shoshanim. Shoshanim being, the lilies being a poetic pet name for the Jewish people. Then there's this cryptic sixth verse that was only published in the 1700s. It is uncertain whether it is original and had been passed along only orally, or whether it is a later addition. It brings the listener from the persecutions of the past into the persecutions of that present moment, of the Middle Ages in Christian Europe. This is a poet who knew exiles and persecutions. He might have lived through the First Crusade in 1096 when, filled with fervor to liberate the Holy Land from Muslim rule, crusaders swept through the Rhineland, massacring Jewish communities on their way. This was a time when Jews lived in frequent terror in Europe. The sixth stanza is both a lament and a plea for vengeance. If this stanza is original, it is no wonder that it did not officially go into print. Okay, so the poem is much more than I'd realized. So why did I react to it the way I did? Maybe it was the music. Maybe because of the music, I had discounted the poem. Too sweet, too simple, almost a children's melody, sounding like a Christmas song. That was the consensus when we were rehearsing it. Roe was like, what is that? Is that a Christmas song? Not Jewish sounding at all, not a minor chord in it. Like cooking without salt.
Or schmaltz.
As it turns out, the reason it feels old-fashioned is because it is very old-fashioned. It's a melody from the 1400s, a German folk song, a tune that others put words onto also, including Martin Luther himself. The Maoz Tzur poem has been sung to other melodies in the Jewish world, but this is the one that caught on in Germany, and this is the one that was transplanted and that rooted itself so firmly in America. For most of us, this is the Maoz Tzur of our childhoods and our entire lives. So the next layer of the story takes place in America, and it has to do with the English translation called Rock of Ages. The word Tzur of Maoz Tzur does mean rock, but Maoz Tzur, the phrase, does not mean Rock of Ages. So why use that phrase? When this translation first appears in America, there's already an Anglican hymn with that name, right? Popular since the 1770s. Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee, right? Like that was already in the culture. So then somebody decides, let's sing the phrase Rock of Ages for Hanukkah. So looking closely at the three-stanza translation, which I think you have on the next page, we realize that it isn't a translation at all, but really a new poem altogether. It doesn't talk about Babylonia or Egypt, or any of those things. It is a new work altogether. It covers similar themes and has a similar meter and a similar rhyme scheme, but it's written in this exalted anthem style. Turns out this Rock of Ages version was written by two 19th century Prussian-born Reform rabbis who were also scholars, Semiticists, and somewhat controversial figures in America. Gustav Gottheil and Marcus Jastrow. And I am sorry that Rinat is not here tonight because, as any rabbinical student can attest, Marcus Jastrow wrote the definitive dictionary of Talmudic Hebrew, still in use. If you are reading Talmud, you are also reaching for the Jastrow. My own copy, this copy, has never been more than an arm's distance in over 40 years. For me, Jastrow was only ever a dictionary, not a person. Yeah, where's the Webster? Where's the Funkin' Wagnall? Where's the Roget? Where's the Roget? Do you actually say that? Yeah, where's the Roget? Other things? Okay, you don't say where's the Julia Child. But you do say where's the Marcella Hazan?
You say, where's the Alice Waters all
What?
the time? Where's the Alice Waters all the time?
Where's the Alice Waters? For me, Jastrow was only ever a dictionary, not a person, but I was wrong. With Gottheil, he set about remaking American Judaism in many ways, and before he came to America in the 1860s, he'd spent several years as the chief rabbi of Worms, the city that has always captured my imagination and where I took my sabbatical last year. Rock of Ages, unlike the original Ma'oz Tzur, does not ask for vengeance. Instead, in lofty words that my teacher, Rabbi Laura Duen Kaplan, compares to the Star-Spangled Banner, it calls for an end not only to Jewish suffering, but to all tyranny. Its final stanza identifies a prophetic role for the Jewish diaspora, who have suffered and been martyred in history, to instead lead a call for true and universal freedom. Oh, this is the one that goes, this third verse, which I bet you've never heard. Children of the martyr race, whether free or fettered, wake the echoes of that song, where you may be scattered. Yours the message cheering, that the time is nearing, which we will see all set free, tyrants disappearing, which will see all set free, tyrants disappearing. So when we gather next week, a week from Sunday, around the candles and begin to sing Ma'oz Tzur, we can now notice how we are reaching back not only to the dark times described in the Hanukkah story, but further to Egypt and Babylonia, and forward to the Rhineland and the Crusades, and then through the great Reform synagogues of New York and Philadelphia, pointing toward a return of the light, pointing toward a dream, an old-fashioned American-style dream of a land where Jews can live without fear and where all tyranny will one day be just memory. May it be so.
May it be so.
So let's sing the first and third verses. How about the first verse in Hebrew, then the first and third of Rock of Ages? Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati Lechana Elisabeach Tikon Beit Tefilati V'sham Toda Nizabeach Le'et Achin Matbeach Mitzar Hamnabeach Azegmor b'shir mizmor Chanukat hamizbeach. Rock of ages, let our song praise thy saving power. Thou amidst the raging foes wast our sheltering tower. Furiously they assailed us, but thine arm availed us, and thy word broke their sword when our own strength failed us, and thy word broke their sword when our own strength failed us. The third verse, starting with the second line. Children of the Holy God, whether free or fettered, wake the echoes of that song where you may be scattered. Yours the message cheering that the time is nearing, which will see all set free, tyrants disappearing, which will see all set free, tyrants disappearing.